The empty space in my driveway felt like a physical wound, a cold void where my hard-earned independence used to sit just hours before. When I called my father, my voice shaking with the terror of a victim who had just discovered a crime, his tone remained eerily calm, almost bored. He didn't ask if I was okay or if I had called the police. He simply told me that I should be proud to help my sister finally get her life on track. It wasn't just a vehicle they had taken under the cover of darkness. It was the realization that in my parents' eyes, I wasn't a daughter, but a silent, involuntary benefactor for their favorite child. The car I had spent 5 years saving for, skipping vacations and working double shifts until my eyes burned, had been gift-wrapped for a sister who had never worked a full week in her life. To understand how my own blood could justify grand theft as a family favor, you have to understand the architecture of our home. For as long as I can remember, my life was defined by the things I could do for myself, while my sister Chloe's life was defined by what others could do for her. Our parents, Arthur and Martha, viewed me as a sturdy oak, something that required no watering and could withstand any storm. Chloe, however, was their hothouse orchid. She was sensitive, she was artistic, and most importantly, she was always just one lucky break away from greatness. I grew up in the shadow of her potential. While I was studying for my accounting degree and working as a waitress until 2 a.m, Chloe was finding herself on a 3-month backpacking trip through Europe that my parents paid for by remortgaging a portion of their house. When I moved into a tiny, cramped studio apartment with a radiator that hissed like a dying animal, Chloe was given our parents' guest suite, renovated with new furniture because she needed a creative space for her jewelry-making hobby that lasted exactly 3 weeks. I never complained. Or rather, I learned that complaining was a wasted breath. Whenever I pointed out the disparity, my mother would press a hand to her heart, her eyes welling with practiced tears. "Elena, darling, you are so strong. You have such a head for business. Chloe, she doesn't have your armor. She needs us. Why must you be so resentful of your own flesh and blood?" So, I channeled that resentment into my career. I became a senior auditor at a top firm. I lived frugally, ate meal-prepped lunches, and put every spare cent into a high-yield savings account. My goal was singular: a brand new charcoal gray SUV. It wasn't just about transportation. It was a symbol. It was the physical manifestation of my sweat, my late nights, and my refusal to ask Arthur and Martha for a single dime. The day I drove it off the lot 6 months ago was the happiest day of my life. I remember the smell of the fresh leather, the way the steering wheel felt cool and firm under my hands, and the silent, purring confidence of the engine. It was mine. Entirely, legally, and spiritually mine. I made the mistake of driving it over to my parents' house for Sunday dinner a week later. I wanted them to be proud of me. I wanted, just once, for my father to look at something I had achieved and say, "Well done, Elena." Instead, the atmosphere at the table shifted the moment I pulled into the driveway. My mother watched the car through the kitchen window, her lips thinning into a tight line. Chloe, who had recently lost her 3rd job in a year, this time as a receptionist because she couldn't handle the negative energy of the office, didn't even congratulate me. She just stared at the car with a look of profound, agonizing longing. It must be nice, Chloe sighed, pushing a pea around her plate. To have so much extra money that you can buy a luxury like that. I have to take the bus to my interviews, and the fumes make me so nauseous I can barely speak when I get there. It's probably why I'm not getting hired. First impressions are everything. My father cleared his throat, a sound that usually preceded a lecture. It's a very flashy car, Elena. A bit much for a single girl, don't you think? It seems indulgent, especially when your sister is struggling just to get to a grocery store. It's not a luxury, Dad. It's a reward for 5 years of work, I said, my voice tight. And it's not flashy. It's reliable. I need it for my site visits. Reliability is a privilege, my mother added softly, casting a pitying look at Chloe. Poor Chloe's old sedan broke down again. The mechanic said the transmission is shot. It would cost more to fix than the car is worth. She's essentially stranded here. I felt the familiar tightening in my chest. That's too bad. Maybe she can use some of the money from the jewelry equipment she sold? The table went silent. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator. Chloe's lower lip began to tremble. I didn't sell it, Elena. I donated it to a youth center. I was trying to be selfless. Enough, my father snapped. We aren't here to audit Chloe's finances. We are a family. We support each other. For the next few months, the car talk became a background noise at every family gathering. It started as hints. Chloe has a big interview across town, Elena. Would you mind letting her borrow the SUV? You can take an Uber. You can afford it. I always said no. I knew Chloe. She treated her belongings like disposable tissues. Her old car had been filled with fast food wrappers and stained with coffee spills. My car was pristine. Then the hints turned into suggestions. My mother called me one Tuesday evening, her voice conspiratorial. Elena, your father and I were thinking, since you're so successful, why don't you sign the SUV over to Chloe? You could buy another one with a small loan. Your credit is so good. And Chloe wouldn't have the burden of a car payment while she's getting back on her feet. It would be a tax write-off for you, probably. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud because I thought it was a joke. Mom, that is the most insane thing I've ever heard. No, the answer is no. Don't ask me again. She hung up on me. For 2 weeks, there was radio silence. No Sunday dinner invites, no guilt-tripping texts. I thought I had finally set a boundary that they respected. I felt a sense of relief, a lightness I hadn't felt in years. I spent those 2 weeks enjoying my car, taking long drives on the weekend just to feel the wind, feeling secure in the life I had built. That brings us back to Monday morning. I woke up at 6 a.m., ready for a high-stakes meeting with a new client. I had my suit laid out, my briefcase packed, and a travel mug of coffee in my hand. I walked out the front door, clicking the unlock button on my key fob. I waited for the familiar beep-beep and the flash of the headlights. Nothing. I looked at the driveway. My heart stopped. I actually walked out into the middle of the street, spinning around, thinking I had somehow parked it elsewhere in a sleepwalking trance. But no, the driveway was empty. There were no signs of broken glass, no skid marks, just a clean, empty space. My first thought was a professional thief. My second thought, the one that made my blood turn to ice, was the memory of my father helping me move into my apartment a year ago. I had given him a spare key to my place, just in case of emergencies. And on that keychain, I realized with a sickening jolt, was the spare key to the SUV that the dealership had given me. I reached for my phone, my fingers fumbling. I didn't call the police first. I called my father. "Dad," I gasped when he picked up. "My car, it's gone. Someone stole it from my driveway." There was a long pause. I heard the sound of the television in the background, the morning news. Then my father spoke in a voice so casual it felt like a slap. "It wasn't stolen, Elena. Don't be dramatic. I came by with the spare key around 3 a.m. I didn't want to wake you. You've been so stressed lately. And we knew you'd just start an argument." I felt the air leave my lungs. "You... what?" "Chloe had to be at her new internship by 8 a.m. today," he continued, as if he were explaining the weather. "It's a prestigious spot, very important for her career. She couldn't show up in a bus or a beat-up rental. It would ruin her confidence. We decided as a family that it was time you stepped up. We've already dropped her off, and she's thrilled. She said the car drives beautifully." "Dad, that is my car," I screamed, the coffee mug slipping from my hand and shattering on the porch. "I paid for it. You had no right. Bring it back right now, or I am calling the police." "Go ahead," my father said, his voice hardening into a cold, patriarchal edge. "Call them. Tell them your father took the car with a key you gave him. Tell them you're so greedy that you'd rather see your sister fail and your parents in handcuffs than share your toys. But remember this, Elena. If you make that call, you don't have a family anymore. We will disown you. You'll be all alone with your precious success. Is that what you want?" He hung up. I stood there, staring at the shards of my mug, the steam rising from the spilled coffee. The world felt silent, tilted on its axis. My own parents had invaded my property in the middle of the night to rob me for the sake of a girl who had never sacrificed a day in her life. I looked at my watch. 6:15 a.m. By Monday morning, everything had changed. And as the shock began to subside, replaced by a searing, white-hot rage, I realized my father was right about one thing. I didn't have a family. I had a group of parasites. And it was time to call the exterminator. The initial shock of the phone call began to subside, replaced by a cold, analytical clarity that only comes when you've been pushed past your breaking point. As I stood on my porch staring at the empty driveway, my auditor's mind started involuntarily replaying the last 3 weeks, connecting dots I had previously dismissed as mere family dysfunction. There had been signs. There were always signs, but I had been blinded by a lingering, desperate hope that my parents might actually love me more than they loved the idea of Chloe's success. The first warning sign happened 2 weeks ago during a surprise visit from my mother. She had shown up with a stack of Tupperware filled with her trademark lasagna, claiming she just wanted to mother her hardworking girl. It was unusual. Martha rarely drove into the city, but I welcomed her with open arms. While I was in the kitchen making tea, I heard the faint clatter of keys from the hallway. When I walked back in, she was standing by the console table where I kept my spare sets, her hand hovering just inches from the bowl. She jumped slightly, her face flushing a guilty pink, and immediately started talking about how she was just tidying up the clutter. I thought she was just being her usual overbearing self. I didn't realize she was scouting. Then there was the dinner the following Sunday. My father, Arthur, had been uncharacteristically interested in the administrative side of my life. He'd asked about the car's title, if I kept it in the glove box or in a safe at home. He'd asked about the insurance and whether I'd listed any secondary drivers. "You know, Elena," he had said, swirling his wine with a predatory rhythm, "in a family like ours, assets should be fluid. It's better for everyone if things aren't so rigid. What if something happened to you? We should have access to your documents just in case." I had laughed it off, telling him I was an auditor and that my rigidity was exactly why I was successful. I didn't see the look he exchanged with my mother, a look of grim determination, as if they were soldiers preparing for a necessary but unpleasant raid. And then there was Chloe. For the past week, she had been posting cryptic messages on her social media. "Big things coming," one read. "Finally getting the respect I deserve. Watch this space." She'd even posted a photo of a high-end leather planner with the caption, "New job, new me, new wheels. Manifesting works." I had assumed she'd bought some beat-up used car with a high-interest loan. I never dreamed she was manifesting my wheels. I didn't wait for a second phone call. I didn't cry. I went inside, changed out of my professional suit and into a pair of sturdy jeans and a dark hoodie. My hands were perfectly steady as I called an Uber. The destination? My parents' house in the suburbs. The ride took 45 minutes. 45 minutes of staring out the window, watching the city skyline disappear, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. When the car pulled up to the familiar white picket fence, my stomach did a slow, sickening roll. There it was. My charcoal gray SUV was parked crookedly in their driveway, half on the grass. Chloe was standing next to it, wearing a new, expensive-looking blazer, her blonde hair perfectly blown out. She was holding a pumpkin spice latte in one hand and her phone in the other, posing for a selfie in front of the car. My car. I stepped out of the Uber, my boots crunching on the gravel. Chloe saw me, and for a split second, a flash of genuine fear crossed her face. But it was quickly replaced by a mask of smug entitlement. "Elena, you're early," she chirped, though her voice lacked its usual confidence. "I'm just about to head out. Don't want to be late for my first day." "Give me the keys, Chloe," I said. My voice was low, vibrating with a frequency I didn't recognize. It was the voice of a stranger. "Oh, don't be like that," she pouted, tossing her hair. "Dad explained it to you. I'm just using it for a while. You have that big salary. You can just get another one." "It's not a big deal." "It's grand theft auto, Chloe. Give me the keys or I'm calling the police right now while I'm standing in front of you." Before she could respond, the front door swung open. My father stepped out onto the porch, his face reddening the moment he saw me. He didn't look like a father. He looked like a landlord about to perform an eviction. "That's enough, Elena," he roared. "I told you on the phone, we are not having this discussion. Chloe is going to her internship, and you are going to go home and think about your attitude." "I'm not going anywhere without my car, Dad. I paid for it. My name is on the title. You stole it." "Actually," my mother said, appearing behind him, her voice dripping with a saccharine, poisonous sweetness, "we checked into that. We did a little paperwork while you were so busy with your important meetings last week." She held up a manila folder. My heart plummeted. A cold sweat broke out across my forehead, and for a moment, the world tilted. The air felt thick, like I was trying to breathe underwater. I lunged forward, moving faster than any of them expected. I snatched the folder from my mother's hand before my father could grab me. My breath was coming in short, jagged gasps. I ripped the folder open, my eyes scanning the documents inside. There it was. The gift of vehicle form for the Department of Motor Vehicles. It was a legal document used to transfer a car title between family members without a sale price. And there, at the bottom, was the signature line. Elena Vance. My name was written in a perfect, flowing script. It looked exactly like my signature. My father had spent years signing my report cards and permission slips. He knew my handwriting better than I did. He hadn't just stolen the car. He had forged my legal signature to transfer the ownership to Chloe. The room, or rather, the driveway, seemed to shrink. I felt a wave of genuine nausea, a physical weight pressing down on my chest as the sheer scale of the betrayal crystallized. This wasn't a loan. This wasn't a misunderstanding. They had planned to permanently, legally strip me of my property. They had committed a felony to ensure their favorite child had a prestigious image. "You forged my name," I whispered, the words feeling like shards of glass in my throat. I looked up at them, my mother with her folded arms, my father with his defiant glare, and Chloe, who was now checking her reflection in the car's side mirror. "You actually forged my signature." "It was for the best," my father said, his voice devoid of any remorse. "You weren't using your resources to help this family, so I had to do it for you. We're your parents, Elena. Everything you have because of us. We gave you life. We gave you an education. This is just back pay." The nausea vanished, replaced by a crystalline, Arctic rage. I looked at the forged document, then at the 3 people who were supposed to be my sanctuary. I realized in that moment that they didn't see me as a person. I was a vending machine. I was an insurance policy. I was a resource to be mined until I was empty. I looked at Chloe, who was now getting into the driver's seat, her hand reaching for the ignition. "Get out of the car, Chloe," I said, my voice now eerily calm. "Make me," she smirked, and she turned the key. The engine purred to life. The engine I had paid for with 60-hour work weeks and missed dinners. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I didn't dial 911. Not yet. I opened my firm's internal directory and looked up the number for our head of legal, a man who owed me a favor for catching a major embezzlement scheme in his own department last year. "Dad," I said, looking him dead in the eye as he stood on the porch. "You said I don't have a family anymore? You're right. But you forgot one thing. You don't have a daughter anymore either. You have an auditor. And I'm about to start a very, very thorough investigation into your lives." I turned my back on them and started walking toward the street, the forged document clutched in my hand like a weapon. The point of no return wasn't when they took the car. It was right now. Because they thought they had stolen a car, but they had actually just handed me the evidence I needed to destroy them. I didn't walk away. I walked as far as the sidewalk, sat on the curb, and dialed the non-emergency police line. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, and my hands were shaking so violently I nearly dropped the phone. The dispatcher's voice was a cool, professional contrast to the fire roaring in my head. I reported a stolen vehicle and a forgery, giving them the address of the house I had grown up in. As I waited, I saw Chloe pull out of the driveway in my SUV. She didn't even look at me. She just adjusted the visor, checked her lipstick, and sped off toward the main road. My father stood on the porch, arms crossed, watching me with a look of pure, unadulterated disgust. "You're actually doing it," he called out, his voice carrying across the lawn. "You're calling the police on your own family over a piece of metal. You are a cold, transactional human being, Elena. We raised a monster." "You didn't raise a monster, Dad," I shouted back, my voice cracking but holding firm. "You raised a victim who finally learned how to read a balance sheet, and your accounts are way into the red." The police arrived 15 minutes later. 2 officers, one older with a weary face, and a younger woman who looked like she'd seen it all. I showed them the forged document. I showed them my ID. I showed them the digital receipt of my last car payment. My father admitted to taking the car with a spare key and forging this signature, I told the officers. My pulse was a physical throb in my temples, a rhythmic thump, thump, thump that made the world feel like a strobe light. The officers walked up to the porch. My mother began to wail, a high, thin sound that was meant to elicit pity. "It's a family matter, officer. Our daughter is having a mental breakdown. She's been so stressed at work she's forgotten she gave the car to her sister as a gift. She's just trying to hurt us." My father stood silent. This was his move, the stoic patriarch. He didn't deny it, but he didn't confirm it. He just looked at the officers with a "can you believe this girl" expression. But when the younger officer asked for the title of the car, my father's silence shifted from stoic to paralyzed. He looked down at his shoes, his jaw tight. "Sir, we need to see the paperwork," the officer repeated. I sent it off for processing," my father muttered. "That's a lie," I interrupted, stepping forward. "He has a safe in the study. He keeps everything there." While the police were questioning them, I sat on the porch steps, my phone in hand. I decided to do what I do best: audit. If they were willing to forge a car title, what else had they done? I pulled up my credit monitoring app, something I hadn't checked in months because my score was always perfect. The screen loaded. My breath hitched. My credit score, which had been a proud 810, was now a 620. I scrolled down to the recent inquiries and open accounts section. My stomach dropped into a bottomless pit of ice. There were 3 credit cards I didn't recognize. A personal loan for $15,000 taken out 6 months ago. All of them used my Social Security number. All of them had a billing address of my parents' house. The second twist hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. I doubled over, a sharp, stabbing pain blooming in my gut. They hadn't just stolen my car. They had been harvesting my identity to fund Chloe's life for the better part of a year. The jewelry business, the Europe trip, the new clothes, it was all me. I was the silent, involuntary sponsor of Chloe's manifested life. "You bastards," I whispered. I stood up, my legs feeling like they were made of water. I walked right past the police officers and into the house. "Elena, you can't be in here," my mother shrieked, following me. I ignored her. I went straight to the study. My father's desk was a mess of papers. I started throwing things: folders, mail, stationery. "Elena, stop this instant," my father roared, finally breaking his silence as he followed the police into the room. You have no right." "I have every right," I screamed, spinning around to face him. I held up my phone, the screen glowing with the list of fraudulent accounts. $15,000, Dad? A personal loan? 3 credit cards maxed out? You didn't just steal my car. You stole my future. You ruined my credit. How could you? My father's face went from red to a ghostly, sickly white. He looked at the police officers, then at the phone, then at my mother. "We were going to pay it back," my mother whimpered, clutching her pearls. "Chloe was going to make it big with her designs. We just needed a bridge. You have so much, Elena. We didn't think you'd notice a few extra bills." "A few extra bills?" I felt a hysterical laugh bubble up in my throat. "This is felony identity theft. This is prison time." "Now, let's not be hasty," my father said, his voice dropping into a manipulative, low tone. He stepped toward me, his hands out as if he were approaching a scared animal. "Elena, think about the scandal. If you press charges, Chloe loses her internship. I could lose my pension if the firm finds out I'm involved in a criminal case. Your mother's heart. She can't take the stress of a trial. Do you really want to be the reason your family ends up on the street?" "You put yourselves on the street the moment you signed my name," I said, my voice cold and hard as a diamond. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from a colleague who worked in the firm's compliance department. I had sent him a quick heads up about the car earlier. "Elena, weird coincidence. I just saw your sister's name on a background check for Apex Consulting. That's the firm we're auditing for the merger. She listed you as her primary reference and said you facilitated her car as a signing bonus from your firm. She's using your professional reputation to get in the door." The third twist. She wasn't just stealing my money. She was wearing my life like a costume to get a job at a company where I had professional influence. "Where is she, Dad?" I asked. "She's at the office, Elena. Leave her alone. She's finally doing well." "She's at the office of a client I'm currently auditing," I said, the irony tasting like copper in my mouth. "She's committing fraud using my name at my own job." I turned to the officers. "I want to press charges. For the car, for the forgery, and for the identity theft. All of it. I want a full police report, and I want her picked up in that car before she reaches the office." "Elena, please," my mother sobbed, sinking to her knees on the Persian rug. "She's your sister. She's just a girl." "She's 26 years old, Mom. She's not a girl. She's a thief, and you're her accomplices." My father looked at the officers, his bravado finally crumbling. "You can't do this. I'm your father." "A father protects his children," I said, leaning in close so only he could hear me. "He doesn't prey on them. From this moment on, Arthur, you are nothing but a person of interest in a criminal investigation. Get out of my way." I walked out of that house as the officers began to read my father his rights. My mother's screams of traitor followed me down the driveway, but for the first time in my life, the sound didn't hurt. It sounded like an admission of defeat. I called an Uber to take me to Apex Consulting. If Chloe wanted to use my wheels and my reputation to start her new life, I was going to be there to make sure she finished it in the back of a squad car. The transformation was complete. The strong daughter was gone. The auditor had arrived, and I was going to reconcile these books until there was nothing left of their lies. The ride to Apex Consulting felt like the final approach to a battlefield. I sat in the back of the Uber, my laptop open on my knees, my fingers flying across the keys. The internal click had happened. The Elena who allowed herself to be guilt-tripped over Sunday roast was dead. In her place was the senior auditor who had once dismantled a multi-million-dollar shell company in a weekend. I wasn't just angry, I was precise. I called Marcus, the managing partner at Apex. He was a man who valued integrity above all else, and we had a professional relationship built on years of mutual respect. Elena? I heard you were coming in for the wrap-up meeting today, but you're a bit early, Marcus said, his voice warm. Marcus, I'm calling you as a courtesy because I value our partnership, I said, my voice steady and devoid of emotion. There is a woman in your lobby right now, Chloe Vance. She is my sister. She is currently using my car, which was stolen this morning, and she is likely using my professional credentials to secure her position. I have already filed a police report for grand theft and identity theft. I'm 3 minutes away. I suggest you have security meet me at the entrance. There was a stunned silence on the other end. Identity theft? Elena, are you serious? I have the forged documents and the credit reports in my hand, Marcus. I wouldn't joke about a felony. Understood. I'll meet you downstairs. As the Uber pulled up to the gleaming glass towers of Apex Consulting, I saw my SUV parked prominently in the executive guest spot. Chloe always did have a flair for the dramatic, even when she was a fugitive. I stepped out of the car, and just as I did, a police cruiser pulled into the lot, its lights flashing silently. I had updated the dispatcher with the new location. I walked into the lobby just as Chloe was finishing a charming conversation with the receptionist. She looked radiant in her stolen confidence, holding a visitor's badge like it was a trophy. When she turned and saw me, flanked by Marcus and 2 police officers, the color drained from her face so fast she actually had to grab the edge of the mahogany desk to keep from falling. Elena? What are you doing here? She stammered, her voice high and thin. I'm here to collect my property, Chloe, I said, walking right up to her. I didn't stop until I was inches from her face. And to make sure you never use my name for anything ever again. Officer, this is just a family misunderstanding, Chloe said, turning to the policeman with her practiced, teary-eyed pout. My sister is very competitive. She's upset because I got a job at her client's firm. She's trying to ruin my big day. Your big day was built on my credit score and a forged signature, Chloe, I said, my voice echoing in the silent lobby. I pulled out the gift of vehicle form. Is this your handwriting? Because it certainly isn't mine. And the $15,000 loan taken out in my name? Did you manifest that too? Marcus stepped forward, his expression one of profound disappointment. Ms. Vance, I think it's best if you hand over the keys and follow the officers. Needless to say, your internship is terminated before it began. We don't employ people who commute to work in stolen vehicles. Chloe looked around the lobby. People were stopping to stare. The prestigious image she had tried to buy with my life was shattering into 1,000 jagged pieces. She turned back to me, her face twisting into a mask of pure, ugly resentment. You're a cold-hearted bitch, Elena, she hissed, the tears now real, but born of rage, not sorrow. You have everything. Why couldn't you just let me have this one thing? You're so rich, you wouldn't have even missed the money. You're destroying this family for a car. I'm not destroying this family, Chloe, I said. And for the first time, I felt a genuine smile touch my lips. It was a cold, liberating sensation. I'm just finally balancing the books. And it turns out, you're a liability I can no longer afford. The officer stepped in. Chloe Vance, you're under arrest for possession of a stolen vehicle and suspicion of identity theft. Hands behind your back. As the handcuffs clicked shut, a sound that felt more melodic than any music I'd ever heard, Chloe began to scream for our parents. She screamed that I was a monster. She screamed that I would regret this. I stood there and watched until they led her out the glass doors and into the back of the cruiser. The aftermath was a whirlwind of legal filings and cold realizations. I didn't back down. When my mother called me, sobbing that they would lose the house if I didn't drop the identity theft charges because the bank would call in the fraudulent loans, I simply told her that maybe she should have thought about the house before she let my father forge my name. "How can you be so cruel?" she wailed. "We're your parents." "You were my parents," I corrected her. "Now you're just defendants. Talk to my lawyer, Mom, and don't call this number again. I'm changing it." I hired a specialized firm to repair my credit, a process that took months of grueling paperwork and sworn affidavits. I pressed the state to prosecute my father for the forgery. He ended up with a suspended sentence and a massive fine that wiped out his savings, the same savings he'd been hoarding while spending my money. Chloe spent 6 months in county jail and was ordered to pay restitution, though I knew I'd never see a dime of it. I didn't care about the money anymore. I cared about the silence. 6 months later, I sat on the porch of my new apartment. It was a penthouse in the city, far away from the suburbs and the ghosts of my childhood. My SUV, fully detailed and smelling of nothing but leather and my own perfume, was parked safely in a private, gated garage. The sun was setting, painting the skyline in shades of bruised purple and gold. I had a glass of expensive wine in one hand and a book in the other. There were no frantic phone calls, no guilt trips, no parasites whispering in my ear that I owed them my soul because they had given me life. I had lost a family, it was true. But as I looked out over the city I had conquered on my own terms, I realized I hadn't lost anything of value. I had traded a house of cards for a foundation of stone. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from Marcus. "New audit project coming up. The client is tough, but I told them you're the best in the business. You interested?" I smiled and set the phone down. I'd get to it on Monday. For now, I just wanted to enjoy the quiet. I had finally learned that the most expensive thing in the world isn't a luxury car or a high-end education. It's the peace of mind that comes when you stop letting people who don't love you tell you what you're worth. I used to think my strength was in how much I could endure. Now I know that my true strength was in knowing exactly when to stop.